My father's 60th birthday invitation didn't come in a card or a fancy envelope, but through a cold, calculated email sent to the entire extended family with a subject line that read, "Heirs only, no dead ends." When I opened it, I expected the usual grandstanding from a man obsessed with legacy, but I wasn't prepared for the fine print at the bottom which explicitly stated, "This celebration is for the future of the family lineage. Please do not bring your daughter, as she is a dead end to the family name." My jaw hit the floor as I read those words over and over, my vision blurring with a mix of hot rage and devastating hurt. He wasn't just insulting me. He was effectively erasing my 8-year-old daughter, Chloe, from the family history simply because she didn't carry his precious last name, and in his warped mind, couldn't carry on the great family legacy. I want to ask you all right now, before I tell you how this blew up. Was I wrong for what I did next? Or would you have done the exact same thing to protect your child from a man who treated her like a mistake? Tell me, because I'm still dealing with the fallout of the absolute chaos I unleashed at that party. To understand why this hit so hard, you have to understand my father, Arthur. Arthur is a man who thinks he's a king without a kingdom, a self-made businessman who built a mid-sized real estate empire and acts like he's a Rockefeller. He has this archaic, almost medieval obsession with the line. He has 3 sons and me, his only daughter. Growing up, I was always the other child. My brothers, Mark, David, and Stephen, were the golden boys, the ones who would inherit the business and keep the Vanderwall name alive. I was just the girl who would eventually be married off to another family. When I married my husband, Julian, and took his last name, Arthur acted like I had committed treason. But the real shift happened when Chloe was born. Because Julian and I decided she would take his surname, and because she's a girl, my father stopped seeing her as a grandchild. To him, she was a dead end. He literally told me at her 5th birthday party that it was a shame she was the end of my branch of the tree. I tried to brush it off as him being a grumpy old man, but this birthday invitation was the final straw. He was turning 60, and he wanted a legacy photo, a picture of him with all his sons and their male children to hang in the corporate office. The weeks leading up to the party were filled with tension. My brothers, who are usually decent guys but are completely terrified of losing their inheritance, tried to convince me to just play along. Mark told me over coffee that I should just leave Chloe with a babysitter for one night to keep the peace. He said, "You know how Dad is. He just wants his vision for the night to be perfect. Don't make it a thing." But how could I not make it a thing? My daughter is a human being, not a footnote in a ledger. Chloe is brilliant, kind, and she absolutely adores her grandpa Artie. Mostly because she's too young to realize he barely looks at her when she's in the room. She had been drawing him a picture for weeks, a big colorful drawing of our whole family, including him at the center. Every time she showed it to me, my heart broke a little more. I realized that if I went to that party alone, I was validating his belief that she didn't matter. I was telling my daughter that she was, indeed, a dead end. I spent nights talking it over with Julian. He was even more furious than I was. He wanted us to boycott the party entirely, but I had a different plan. I realized that if I didn't show up, Arthur would just use it as fuel to talk about how difficult I was and how I never respected the family. No, I needed to show up. And I needed to bring a guest that would make his heirs-only rule look like the joke it actually was. I started doing some digging. See, my father likes to pretend our family is this pristine, unbroken line of success, but every family has secrets. I reached out to my great-aunt Martha, the family historian and the only person Arthur is actually afraid of because she knows where all the bodies are buried. Martha hates Arthur's sexism. When I told her about the dead end comment, she let out a laugh that sounded like gravel in a blender. She told me, "Honey, if your father wants to talk about heirs and legacies, he should probably be careful about who he excluded 35 years ago." That's when I found out about the other heir. It turns out, before my mother, Arthur had a very serious relationship with a woman from a lower social standing, as he put it. They had a son. A son Arthur paid off the mother to take away and keep quiet about, all to protect his image as he started his business. This son, whose name is Marcus, is a few years older than my oldest brother. He grew up knowing who his father was, but was legally barred from contacting him due to an NDA his mother signed in a moment of desperation. But those NDAs, They don't apply to me, and they certainly don't apply to a granddaughter who was never mentioned in them. I spent 2 weeks tracking Marcus down. I found him living 3 states away, working as a high school principal. He was a good man, a family man, and someone who had zero interest in Arthur's money, but a lot of interest in finally seeing the man who discarded him. I want you to really think about the situation I was in. I had the choice to stay home and be forgotten, to go alone and be complicit, or to blow the entire legacy narrative to pieces. My father wanted a night that celebrated his perfect line of succession, excluding my daughter because she wasn't valuable enough. So I decided to give him exactly what he asked for. I brought a real heir. Before I tell you what happened when I walked through those ballroom doors with Marcus and Chloe, I want you to pause right now. Go down to the comments and tell me, if you found out your parent was erasing your child for the sake of their ego, how far would you go to humble them? Would you have brought the secret son, or would you have handled it privately? I need to know if I'm the villain here. The night of the party arrived. The venue was a high-end country club, dripping in gold decor and Vanderwall branding. My brothers were there in their matching suits, their sons lined up like little soldiers. Arthur was at the head of the main table, looking like he was presiding over a royal court. He was beaming, shaking hands, and talking loudly about the strength of the name. I arrived late on purpose. I waited until the room was quiet, right as Arthur was about to start his big legacy speech. I walked in wearing the brightest red dress I owned, holding Chloe's hand. She was clutching her drawing, looking adorable in her favorite sparkly dress. Beside me was Marcus. He didn't look like a secret. He looked like a mirror image of my father. Just 30 years younger, and with a much kinder set of eyes. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. My father's face went from a celebratory red to a ghostly, sickly white. He gripped the edge of the podium so hard his knuckles turned purple. I walked right up to the front, Chloe skipping along beside me, completely oblivious to the tension. I smiled the most pleasant, toxic smile I've ever produced and said, "Happy birthday, Dad. You said heirs only, so I thought I'd finally introduce you to your firstborn. I figured since you were so worried about dead ends, you'd want the man who actually carries your DNA to be part of the legacy photo." The guests started whispering immediately. My brothers looked like they wanted to melt into the floor. Arthur couldn't even speak. He looked at Marcus, then at me, then at Chloe. Chloe, bless her heart, stepped forward and held out her drawing. "I made this for you, Grandpa. It's the whole family," she said, her voice ringing out in the silent hall. Arthur didn't reach for it. He just stared at Marcus. Marcus, to his credit, was a total class act. He looked my father dead in the eye and said, "I don't want your money, Arthur. I just wanted to see the man who thought a name was more important than a person. It looks like you haven't changed much." My father tried to bluster, to call security, to claim Marcus was an imposter, but Aunt Martha stood up from her table. She leaned on her cane and said, "Sit down, Arthur. We all know the truth. You've spent 40 years pretending you're a king, but you're just a man who's afraid of his own shadow. If you want a legacy, look at these 2 people you tried to throw away." The party fell apart after that. Most of the extended family was horrified, not by Marcus's existence, but by the fact that Arthur had hidden a son and was now trying to banish his own granddaughter. My brothers were caught in the middle, but once they realized Marcus wasn't there to sue for the business, they actually looked relieved. The legacy photo never happened. Arthur ended up retreating to his office while the guests awkwardly finished their dinners and left early. I took Chloe and Marcus out for burgers afterward. It was the best family dinner I've ever had. Chloe loved her new uncle, and Marcus finally got the closure he needed. The aftermath was messy, as you can imagine. My father tried to cut me out of the will officially the next morning, but here's the kicker. Aunt Martha holds the trust for the family land the business sits on, and she informed him that if he touched a hair on my inheritance, she'd revoke the lease and leave his company homeless. He's currently in a self-imposed exile, refusing to speak to any of us, but the heirs only rule is officially dead. My brothers have actually started reaching out to Marcus, and we're planning a real family reunion, one where everyone is invited, regardless of their last name or their value, to a dead-end ego. I taught my father a lesson he'll never forget. A legacy isn't built on names and bloodlines. It's built on how you treat the people who are supposed to love you. I don't regret a single second of it. My daughter knows she belongs, and my secret brother is no longer a secret. It's funny how a dead end can actually be the start of a much better path. If you think I was right to expose the truth and crash that party, hit that like button. It was a wild ride, and I'm glad I finally stood up to the king. Subscribe for more stories about family drama and standing your ground. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far, or did Arthur get exactly what he deserved? I'll see you all in the next story.